All right. So it's super exciting to be here to talk everything of what's new in Android, and of course, as Courtney mentioned, it kind of extend into Google Play Services and into the other APIs with the support libraries, and of course the whole plethora of changes if you're an Android developer that you know that are coming. So when we talk about what's new in Android, it's like a little bit, it's always a little bit interesting because Android just isn't Android, and while the core operating system has been updated, there's a lot of new changes, of course, in the other packages that we know as an Android developer. So what I want to guide you through is not only just what's new in Android, but what's new when it comes to the support libraries, Google Play Services. What happens when you're developing applications not only with the traditional Xamarin approach, but also with Xamarin Forms. So we'll take a look at the entire overview of this and give you some guidance on where to get started. Now, like I mentioned a few times already, there's three main areas with Android that have been updated. Not only just Android Marshmallow giving us brand new APIs in the core operating system, but the support libraries and Google Play Services enable us to add new features to our applications for devices that aren't running the latest version of Android. Now, I'll say this, with Android Marshmallow, or Android M, as you'll hear me kind of say over and over again, because it's a lot shorter than Marshmallow. Not as cute, but it's a lot easier to say. With Android M, in the marketplace, as an Android developer, we've always been worried about upgrade paths and when's the rollout. And Android M was just released to Nexus devices last week. What's very interesting about the entire overview of Android is that about 23% of all Android devices are actually running the latest version of Android Lollipop. Will soon hopefully be all updated to Android M. And additionally, when you kind of go back to the certain percentages currently, when you look at the Android dashboard, 95% of all devices are running Ice Cream Sandwich or better. And in fact, 60 devices are running KitKat or better. So the upgrade cycle of Android is improving immensely. And we've already seen manufacturers such as Samsung and Sony come out saying, and Motorola too, coming out saying that they're going to be updating all of their devices to Android Marshmallow in the coming months that were released within the last 2 years, which is very, very important when we talk about the new features and the focus of Marshmallow. And with Marshmallow, there's really three key areas. I think Google focused a lot on polishing not only just the user experience, but the APIs for us to use and the user experience. And when it comes to polish, it's always about performance. So they gave us a lot of tools to enhance our performance when we're doing things on the background, but also a lot to be aware of. And also the core operating system feels a lot smoother. And there's a whole lot of just new APIs for us to play around with as far as performance of our applications. And lastly, a key focus, not so much for developers, but more for users, is actually battery saving and power consumption. However, there's a really big impact on developers that we'll talk about during the webinar. Now I'm going to go back and forth between some code and, of course, some demos, so you'll see me hop in and out of these slides. So there's a few key highlights with Android Marshmallow that I'm going to cover. There's a lot more when you actually go to the developer portal or to our introduction to Android M on our developer portal that you'll be aware of. But the ones that we're going to cover specifically are runtime permissions, which is, to me personally as an Android developer, is one of the largest changes to the Android operating system since it was launched when it comes to development. Voice interactions. And not only just interacting via voice, but there's a big trend with Android applications for deep, rich interactions with your users, things like app indexing and app links, which have been around for a little bit of time in Google Play Services, and allow you to deeply link content from the web into your application. So when they click on a link, it opens into your application instead of going to the website. So kind of this interaction, keeping your users in your application is very, very important, and also now getting them into your application is what we'll take a look at with voice interactions. And next up is a big change, super exciting in the entire world of authentication when it comes to the new touch sensors, and a really cool API that I'll talk about, which is called Direct Share, which I think is a very cool highlight. So let's first talk about permissions, because I mentioned this before, but to me it is a huge fundamental change. We lived in this wonderful world, if you will, of telling Android applications and showing our users what types of permissions we wanted. We went to our Android manifest file or our project options. We clicked a bunch of boxes and we said, I want identity, I want context, I want location, I want just all the options given to me. And this was really it was good and bad. The bad stuff was that well, you would ask for 100 permissions. You know, there's 130 permissions in Android, so you may ask for like 10 or 15 permissions. But if you add a permission, let's say you need access to contacts for one little bit of functionality that maybe you'll use or maybe you won't use, your users won't be able to auto-update your application because they have to go to Google Play and then say, yes, either they can have this new permission, maybe they won't accept it. And the real problem is because when you have this list of permissions or even a new permission, it's out of context. We're not able to essentially tell our users why we need this permission. And there was no way for us to really engage our users in any way to tell them why we need all these permissions and what we're using them for. So obviously you get something like this, which is kind of scary to a user for like Facebook Messenger. They need all these permissions during install time. If you add anything, you're going to see another list, and it's like really, really bad. But of course, advantages, complete, total developer freedom. And I think that we've been spoiled quite a bit in the Android world, and I've loved it. I need a permission, go, 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 and you know, my users grant it to me just by installing my application. There's a big, big change though with the new runtime permissions. That's what they're called, and they're going to look something like this. Essentially, for any permissions that you want, a certain subcategory of permissions, I should say, that you want, you'll have to ask your user for permissions to use that functionality. So when you're using an API that needs this certain runtime permission, you'll have to actually write some code to prompt the user for specific information to allow or deny. Now this is really great. It puts our users in control of our applications. It contextualizes the permissions, so we actually can tell our users a little bit why we're using these permissions. And that way, if your application does need a lot of permissions, they won't see this big, big, scary list at install time. They'll see a smaller list, and then they'll just be granted. They'll grant you as they need them. So it's really great. Let's say you have a messaging application that perhaps you, for some reason, have. Let's say your users don't, need to take a photo for a month, 2 months, 3 months. They don't realize that it's there. That you add this feature later. Well, they know. Let's say you add the later, even add it later. They no longer would, it would auto update. They would see the button, and then when they press it, they'll be asked to say, "Hey, we need this permission to actually take photos." So it really gives them that control. Some disadvantages, though, of course, that now we have to write some code to handle this. Additionally, though, this code that's running for the permissions has to do a few things. Not only just has to ask for the permission, but now we must actually deal with the interesting part that users can go and actually turn off these permissions at any time in the settings. And we'll take a look at the actual Android Marshmallow running on my Nexus 9. Now there's 9 groups. Android and Google have simplified these into 9 groups. Calendar, location, microphone, SMS, and phone, and all these other ones on here that you're seeing. Now we call these permission groups because what's really nice here is that these permission groups account for about 30 of the 130 permissions on Android. So for instance, for contacts, you may need to read contacts, write contacts, update contacts, do all this other stuff, and integrate with contacts. If your user grants you permission for contacts, that'll be the pop-up, can my application, do you give it permission for contacts? You can then get anything in that group when you request it. So that's really nice. So instead of having like 4 or 5 different checkboxes, and it's not 4 or 5 different pop-ups, it's one pop-up for that entire group. Now, there's an important part that we're seeing down here, which is this is API 23 only. Android Marshmallow is API 23. And what that means is that when you compile your application against Android 6.0 Marshmallow, API 23, and set your target for API 23, the permission checks will only occur on your application running on Android Marshmallow devices. if you don't put in these permission checks and you try to access an API and you've compiled against Marshmallow, you have the target set as a Marshmallow, and you try to call an API, then I believe your application is going to crash and it's going to have some very serious issues because you don't have access to those APIs, or the APIs just won't work. However, don't worry, we actually get tons of permissions still granted to us at install time. So Bluetooth, Internet, Vibrate, Settings, Alarm, Accounts, Network State, and a whole bunch of anything else that aren't in the permissions group. And everything is still declared in your application manifest, so at least that workflow is very, very similar. Now, when we request permissions, I'm going to show you this in code, we have 3 important steps to do. The first thing up top that we're seeing is a read-only string array of all the permissions that I want to request, aka my permission group, if you will. So my permissions for location are my course and my fine. And what we're going to see down below in my request permissions method that I mocked out is that I have a new method called, the first if statement there is if chuck self permission, and I pass in a permission in the group. If I have a permission of the group, I'm going to have all the permissions under the sun that I've requested. So when I check that self permission, and if it's been granted, I'm good to go. I can return true, and then I can make any of my network calls, or any of my location calls that I need. Else, we're going to see another if statement here, and this very short and sweet method that is in Google or in Android called should show request permission rationale, and you pass it that permission. Now, what is that thing? Because that's a really long name. Essentially, what that says is if the user revokes your permission or they have denied your permission multiple times, you then have the ability to explain to your user why you need to read the contacts or you need to get the location, for instance. And then the very last thing you're going to do is request the permissions. And notice here that I'm passing in the array of permissions that I want. And that will pop up one dialog box, even though it's 2 permissions, they're in a group. And then I pass in this ID. That request location ID is just an integer that I specify. Now, when my user sees a dialog box, it's the same dialog box for every application. You can't really customize it at all. You're going to get a callback for either granted or denied. And what we're going to see here is that this is on the activity. It says on request permission result. I get back a request code. I get back some permissions. And what I can see here is if the permission was granted or denied based on that request code. So if I have multiple requests for different things, I can switch case over them. In this instance, I'm just showing a little snack bar if things were granted or denied. So that's really nice and very nifty to actually just easily handle that workflow. And this would be in your main activity in that instance. Now, I did say that you're going to have to call, you actually have to do these checks with every API call that you do, because for instance, when we look at the app permissions of an application, we can see that I can actually toggle off, let's say for Google Contacts, phone, calendar, location, just by toggling this switch. So you have to check every single time your application's running. However, you may be wondering, what if my application is like a photo application or something that needs to integrate with my contacts or access the phone? A good example is Google Hangouts. It's an application that integrates with your contacts, with your SMS, and even location and camera. It needs different permissions. So what's really nice here, and what you could do when you need to handle necessary permissions, is do a cold start. For instance, welcome to my application. We need this permission, this permission, this permission. You can explain to your user why. And if you have multiple permissions and you're requesting multiple permissions, which I'll kind of show you today, you'll just see 1 of 2, 2 of 3, or etc. for all the different permissions. So let's take a look at that really quick. I'm going to pop over into Xamarin Studio, and I have 2 different applications in my little workspace here. But the first thing I want to show you is how you install the tools. So if we go here and we go into the Android SDK Manager, I've installed a few things. I'm going to zoom in here. I've installed the latest SDK tools, and what we'll see down here that's important is to download the latest SDK platform for Android 6.0 API 23. So once you've installed that, you're going to be good to go, and you'll actually see that light up inside of Xamarin Studio or Visual Studio. Now if I go over here to my Marshmallow permissions and go to my options, there's going to be a few things that I need to set. The first thing here under General is my target framework. This is essentially what am I compiling to? against? What APIs will I see? And I'm going to do that against Android 6.0. Now over here inside of my Android application, there's a few things. We're going to see minimum Android version, and then we're going to see target Android version, which I've set to Android 6.0. Now it's very important, and I've gone ahead and checked access course location and access find location because I still need those permissions. Now what's really important here is that I've set the target to 23. It's very important to remember that this brand new permission model only occurs when you set those two to API 23 and your application is running on Android Marshmallow. If your same application is running on older versions of Android, nothing changes. All the same permissions that you've had before, nothing has changed at all. So it's very important to remember that when you're actually building your application. So I've gone ahead and changed that. I wanted to show you where to go. Now, I've done a few things over here. I've installed my geolocator plugin from my packages over here, and that's a simple cross-platform API enabling me to get geolocation. So I'm going to use some geolocation and get where I'm at here in Boston today. So here's my permissions group. As we can see, my access course and find location. When I come down my page, I have a few different things. I want to show you different ways of getting it. Anytime that I want to get the location, I call this method called try get location async. And what this does is two things. In the traditional way, we would check against the API and say, is my current SDK less than 23? So am I on Lollipop, KitKat, whatever? Then just go get my location async. I don't care about the new permissions, anything like that. I am fine. Else, we need to go ahead and get this location permissions async. And this is that code that we're going to see in the past from the slides. I access the find location. I go ahead and check that self permission, and if it's granted, I get the location. Else over here, I have a little snack bar that's going to pop up to say, hey, you need locations to get, maybe coffee shop locations. And then the last thing I'm going to do is actually request that permission. Now, I'll say, and then, for instance, up here, we're going to see my callback. I'm going to put some code folding on up here. There we go. That's going to do the same thing. Either my permissions have been granted, and I can go and show a little snack bar and then go get the location async, else it's been denied, and that's sad. Now, there's some tedious code in here that's actually been solved for us. This little bit of code here, this try get location async, it's a little bit tricky because we don't want to probably check against the API version every single time. Well, part of the Android support packages and the support package 4, we no longer have to actually, where's it at? We no longer have to just do check self permission. We can actually run a little compat version, which essentially is the same exact call, but I say context compat and activity compat. And this gives us special APIs for backwards compatibility that will just always return true or false. If we're on older versions of Android, I don't have to worry about it. It'll turn true. So I don't have to do those API checks. So let's go ahead and run this. I have Visor over here, and here's my my Nexus 9 that I have. There we go. Now, this application I wanted to show you, I have a bunch of stuff installed, and this is called Marshmallow Permissions. I just have it in debug mode, and we're going to notice a few things up here. We can notice that I have permissions. Here it is. I have storage and location. Storage is just because I'm in debug mode. I'm not actually saving anything. But let me go ahead and toggle off permissions there. There's my location. It's done. I'm going to go ahead and launch this application. Here it is. Very simple. I just have get location compat. I'm going to tap get location. Now notice that I've gone ahead and revoked the permission. So what happens here is I have some rationale that pops up. It says that location access is required, so I'll hit OK. And this is important. We can see that there's a allow Marshmallow permissions, which is the name of my application. And this is handled by the system. You can't customize this at all, unfortunately, besides the application name. So I'll just kind of allow. Now I have this permission. It can go out and get the location. This is only on Wi-Fi, so we'll see how well this works. It's working earlier, so that's good. There we go. There's my lat and long in my application. And we can see what that call looks like when I go up here. So I was using my cross geolocator, getting the location async, and then doing some string formatting on there. So very, very simple to actually get that running. Now let's say I wanted to add more different permissions in here. So what I could do is I could say, let me go in and say manifest.permission.access. So camera. Let me get like camera, for instance. So let me go ahead now, and I'm going to go ahead and I've added this to the permissions list. I'm going to go ahead and run again. And what I'm going to do first is go back to my settings. And we're going to go ahead and toggle that off. There we go. Cool. Now when I come here, I'm going to say get location. Then my pop-up's going to come up, and should say allow. Oh, interesting. Let's double check here. May have already had the permission check on there. So that should show all my permissions. I'll have to check that later. Might have one little snag in my demo. It should show me all my different, oh, I know what I didn't do. I didn't come into my manifest, and I didn't toggle camera. So you have to match those two together, so Android actually knows what to do. So let's try this one more time. Let's go back to my settings. I'm going to go and launch this one more time. And ideally, what we should see, if this is going to happen correct, is I should see a permission check for not only my location, but also for the camera. So let's go ahead and try this one more time. We'll bring up Visor. There we go. So see how I paired not only the Android manifest, but also the permission check that I'm doing there. So let's go ahead and relaunch it. All right, there we go. So now there's that. There we go. Now we have two permissions, one of two. So it's going to say, do I want to take pictures? I could hit deny if I wanted to. I'll hit allow. It shows the never ask again because I've asked multiple times, so that's an option for the user, but I'll hit allow. So now we have that permission, and we're good to go. So I wanted to give you an overview of what it looked like doing multiple permissions at the same time. Cool. Let's hop back into the slides, because we've got quite a lot more to cover. So interestingly enough, with the introduction of Google Now and actually integrating into the Android operating system, where you can actually speak and say, "Okay, Google," and then say, "Take a picture, do something," ask to take a reminder, navigate me to this location. Essentially, Google Now has the ability to launch your application or give context when it's asked a question. And when we want to interact with our applications, it's really interesting. About 50% of users of Android devices are speaking to their device on a daily basis. So we can actually utilize this in a few ways. Already out of the box today, there's some system actions, such as starting a run, taking a picture, that we can link into to launch our application. But the interaction stopped at that point. What if we wanted a way to actually start an interaction with our users utilizing voice? A good example is maybe they launch an application for music and say, "Okay, Google, start playing music on my app." Then my application would launch, but I need more information. So perhaps I want to ask them what genre they want to listen to. What's nice here is that I'll still present a list of all the different genres, but I'll have Google Now right into my application that'll enable me to interact and have this voice experience and conversation with my users. I can say, "What genre do you want to listen to?" And they can just verbally say rock or hip hop, and it'll actually start immediately playing that music. Now, the system voice actions are the system actions that exist today, such as media, fitness, local, open. A good example is like, "Okay, Google, take a picture." Like, what camera do you want to use? And then have this interaction of maybe selfie or say cheese back and forth. So these are the existing voice actions, and you can extend them. Additionally, you can create a custom one. They just have to be approved by Google. So if you already have an existing intent filter, such as action image capture or the secure, you already have the default category, and all you have to add is intent category voice. This will then enable you to actually start some requests with your users. There's a few different requests that we can prompt. For instance, there's an abort, a command, pick option, complete, or confirmation. Over here, I could ask my users to pick from a list of options, such as all those different genres, Or maybe it's a bunch of different ways to say take a picture. And over here, we'll get an on option result when my user has given me back, or they could cancel and I could finish the activity. So this is like my little class that I'm implementing, and then when I want to use it, when my application starts up, my activity has a new Boolean on it. It says is voice interaction. So this is telling me that my activity was launched with a voice interaction, and then my voice interactor is available. So I'll create a pick option request and a whole bunch of different options of maybe cheese, ready, go, take it, okay. And then I'm going to prompt and submit this request to the voice interactor to prompt my user to actually reply back to me. So that was a little interactive demo of me speaking actually to my application, my voice camera, and I wrote a whole blog about this on blog.xamarin.com for voice interactions and how I integrated this, which is very cool. So you can imagine if you have an application doing this stuff today, it's easily to extend to actually add these new voice interactions. But let's talk about authentication, because I think I'm really super excited about getting my new Nexus 6P. I'm a huge phone user of the Nexus 6, and I'm excited to get the Nexus 6P. And also, there's some brand new touch sensors, not only on the 6P, but on the Samsung devices and also on the 5X Nexus line. So this is a brand new sensor that's going to be added that'll be compatible with Android Marshmallow. And this is enabling us to do a few things. iOS users for a long time have had like Touch ID, and now we have some fingerprint authentication. But I'm super excited about Confirm Credential, which is a new API that I'm going to talk about, which leverages not only the touch sensors, but enables us to also bring this to older devices to see when was the last time our users actually unlocked their screen. So let's first talk about fingerprint authentication, because this is a new sensor on new devices. Essentially, we've added into the API Fingerprint Manager, which is just a system service that you would get access to. And there's a simple call that says authenticate. You pass in a crypto object, an authentication callback, and essentially Google will, in Android, the Android operating system will use a crypto key from the key store to actually authenticate with the user and ensure that the crypto key matches when you're actually touching the touch sensor. Now, usually this is going to be a per transaction, like when I want to log into my application instead of typing the password, or I'm doing something at checkout, or I haven't logged in yet and you want to authenticate your users. This is going to be used automatically with Android Pay, which is the brand new payment system. It used to be called Google Wallet, and now it's called Android Pay. If you want to use the Fingerprint API, there's a few things that you need to know. There's a brand new permission, of course, got to have some permissions. Fortunately, there's no runtime stuff that you need to do. And also, you do have to provide a user interface. We have a great example of this on our samples documentation of how to provide an interface. Unfortunately, I haven't received my 6P yet, so I can't really demo this, but there is a way to do it in the emulator via command line. I'm super excited, though, about Confirm Credentials, which I can show you guys today. And essentially, Confirm Credentials says, let's take the most secure thing on our device already. It's not a password that we had to figure out and put into our back end, put into our front end. We don't have to have a PIN application. The most secure thing is what our users have already set up. Their lock screen, a PIN, a picture, or the brand new touch sensor of their device that essentially will tell us if they've unlocked, if the actual user has unlocked the device. So what's really cool here is I use an application called Robinhood on Android. It allows me to take and do individual stock investments with zero fees. It's very, very cool. It's a beautiful application. However, it's really tedious because every single time my application goes to the background, or I lock my phone, or I come back, I have to enter a PIN that I set up in the application. If I get logged out, I have to reset up the PIN. It's super annoying. I know it seems very small and tedious, but I've already entered my PIN on my lock screen. Why do I have to do it again? Well, Confirm Credential essentially says, let's create a crypto key in the key store with a specific timeout policy that will sync across all of the applications on the system. that timeout device. So you say, I would like, for instance, to know when did my user log into their device and unlock it in the last 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, hour, for instance. And if they've done so, then they're authenticated, they're good to go. Else, prompt them with the actual dialogues they know already, the unlock screen. So there's no custom user interface that we need to implement. So let's take a look at that. So over inside my Android Marshmallow activity, I have another application over here called Confirm Credentials. It just has a main activity. It's very, very simple. What's cool is that it's like simulating essentially is emulating a purchase. So I want to purchase an item. If I've logged in to my device in the last 10 seconds or minute, for instance, I'm pretty sure I'm authenticated. So the first thing that we'll notice is I have a confirmed timeout of 10 seconds. And I use the Keyguard Manager. A Keyguard essentially is our lock screen. That's the kind of code name for it. So what I'm going to get here first, I'm going to go and collapse this down, is I'm going to get the Keyguard Manager, and I'm going to see if it's secured. Now, is Keyguard secured will essentially tell us if they actually have a PIN or a PIN or a lock screen or a Touch ID that they've set up. And going forward with Android Marshmallow, it's going to be kind of a de facto that you're going to set this up, and most users are going to have this by default. Else, you could prompt them in this instance where I tell them, hey, you should go ahead and set up your lock screen. If you're in a BYO, bring your own device, BYOD type scenario in the enterprise, and you're handing out your devices, you can, of course, use a lot of the Android for Work things to specify that they have to have a keyguard set up anyways. So that'll be nifty. Also, I'm going to create my key. So let's go ahead and look at the create key. It's actually pretty simple. What I'm going to do essentially here is go to the Android key store, and all this is really boilerplate code. So I'm going to create a key that has a bunch of this specified encrypt and decrypt with this very specific code as block. And here's what we're going to see. These are the two important things. Set user authentication required and set user authentication validity duration seconds. And I've actually hard-coded it to 30 for this demo, but let's actually change it to 10 again. I think it's 10. We'll see. And then we can say generate key. And that's it. That's our key. We don't have to save it. It's just part of the system. Now, when we actually want to authenticate our users, we can attempt to maybe purchase button. So maybe I want to purchase. Now, to actually use the confirm credentials, it's going to look a little bit scary here, but essentially we're going to grab that key from the key store and attempt to encrypt anything. And if it's successful, then hey, it's a valid key and they've unlocked their device. Else, so that's here, that's what we're going to do. We're going to create that secret key, we're going to get our cipher, and we're going to try to encrypt it right here. If that works, then we're good to go and we can show that the user's already authenticated. Else we're going to show the authentication screen and we'll get a user not authenticated exception. So let's go and see what that looks like. Here it is. And what this looks like is very simple. Essentially, the confirmed device credential intent is going to be created for us via the Keyguard Manager, and we're going to start that activity for result. So this will launch the confirmed credentials, and we'll get a callback saying either we were successful or we weren't. And then we can make the actual purchase. So let's take a look here at that sample. So here I'm going to go back and we're going to take a look at our confirmed credential sample. And it's going to look pretty simple. Do I want to get this backpack at $62? This looks pretty good. I haven't logged into my device in a while. It's been unlocked, so I'm going to hit purchase. What we're going to see is go ahead and confirm your pattern, which is the same exact thing that I had before when I unlocked my device. I've unlocked it, and I've gone ahead and I've purchased it. Now, it's only been a few seconds, so I'll hit purchase again, and we'll notice that it's been within the last 10 seconds, so I'm totally good to go to make additional purchases on my device, and there's no worry. So now if I just keep waiting, and if I keep talking and carrying on, and I'm pretty sure I set it to 10, but maybe it's 30, so we'll probably give it a few more seconds, and I hit purchase again. Oh, must have set it to 30 seconds. So that's pretty good. What we'll see, if I actually wait long enough, and actually I have a timer, let me see if I give myself a timer here of the timeout policy. This is pretty interesting. And let's go ahead and do a little timer here. So I left that going, and there's a few good questions that came in about if there's a maximum amount of time from the Keyguard Manager. I don't believe there is. It should be in the API. You usually set it. They said that you can set it for hours, minutes. I don't think there's a necessarily maximum that I've seen, but I'll have to check the documentation there. So I have a timer. See, we're at 21 seconds, 22 seconds. So hopefully now, if I hit purchase again, boom, we get our confirmed credentials, and we're good to go. So that's very nifty when I'm doing that. So I really like that. And in fact, if you had an application that wanted to make sure that you unlocked your device every single time, you could just set a bigger timeout policy because you know that your user did unlock their device because you're using your application. So that's really cool. All right. Let's take a look at a few other things. Direct Share is a brand new way of allowing our users to interact with our applications. Essentially, what Direct Share does is our applications have always been able to share text, share a photo, and then on the other side, our application could receive that photo or text and do something with it. However, just like the voice interactions, everything stopped at that point, which meant your application could just launch a generic activity via intent filter, and then you had to ask your users what they wanted to do. An application such as text messaging, WhatsApp, even an email, or just the messaging application, they know what your most common users are, maybe that you're sending messages back and forth. So Direct Share essentially says, let me register my application to not only accept text, but also opt into direct sharing, and you can specify to Android via background service what type of additional context could be given to the share menu. For instance, here the messaging application says, hey, the most two popular people that you message are Adam and Maya. So put those with their image right in the direct share, whether it's a text or it's an image. And then your application will still show up in the bottom in all of the applications. And all of these will be filtered based on who's going into the direct sharing, but also how popular your application is with your users. So this is very nifty, and you can specify anything you want, including images that will show up into the direct share menu. So I think these different types of interactions with our users are more engaging, really help bring Android M to the next level of driving our users back into our application and giving them more context to what we want them to do. Now, we'll talk about battery saving optimizations and things to look at. There's two brand new, essentially Android M specific changes. One called Doze, which is when our devices are idle, and also App Standby, which is when our apps are just sitting around. So let's first take a look at Doze. Doze essentially uses all of the different sensors on the Android devices to attempt to say, hey, I don't want to drain battery because my device is unplugged and it's sitting somewhere with the screen off and it's not doing anything. And in fact, most likely it doesn't need to receive network state or do anything special. So when the device is just sitting around, it's not moving, so it's not in your pocket, it's not going around anywhere, Android will start turning off stuff. It'll disable network, it should disable wake locks, or ignore your wake locks, I should say, and it will prevent certain things like the Alarm Manager, Sync, and Job Scheduler from happening in your applications. Now this is very important because some people may be doing a lot of processing in background services where you're doing and using the Job Scheduler or syncing. So it's important to realize that you should be doing more try-catching around these different activities or handle the scenarios where things were in Doze mode in your application. There's a few ways to test this, since you may not have an Android Marshmallow device, or if you have a device, you don't want to sit around and wait for it to go into mode. What you can do here is you can actually send via the command terminal some ADB shell commands, and essentially you can say that unplug the battery, put the device in idle mode, and turn on the Doze at this point. So that'll allow you to test the scenarios where you're using the alarm managers or things like that. Now also, it's important to note that if you're using Google Cloud Messaging to do any push notifications, normal push notifications will come in once everything's kind of been queued up or it's plugged in, it's good to go, unless you actually mark your messages with high priority. So if something's super, super pertinent, if you mark your push notification with high priority, the system will go ahead and handle everything for you, and those will still come through. Now, App Standby is a little bit different. essentially, I haven't figured out when app standby exactly when it will turn on. But what it's saying is when Android detects that your app is sitting there open and the user has not touched it. I actually do this quite often. Currently, I have like a Google Doc open that's just sitting here, and it's saying for a certain amount of time, if the user didn't explicitly launch the app, or there's not a process in the foreground, or there's no notifications on the lock screen tray, or nothing really happening, so it's a very minimum amount that this could happen, I think. Essentially do a few things. Let's turn off network and let's turn off job and syncing of that application. So this could be just an application that accidentally gets sit around with the screen on for some amount of time. So you can, of course, test this too by actually doing a few ADB commands and actually sending your package name, because it's on a per app instance here. So it's not a system level. It'd be actually turning on for your app when it's running. So you can actually test how that works. A few good things and processes around that is if you need to test network state, you can use the connectivity plugin for Xamarin, which is a Nuget package, and test connectivity that way. Here what we're going to see is the Google Cloud messaging again. When set to high priority, those messages will still come in even while dozing or in app standby. That's what that should say there. Cool. Now that's Android M in a nutshell, but I want to cover a few other things before we go into more Q&A. Is that it's a big year for not only material design, but the support libraries and Google Play services. It seems like just yesterday, Jeremy Laval and I were on stage at Xamarin Evolve telling everyone to update their applications to material design and get ready for Lollipop, and it was super exciting just because everything was beautiful, and in fact tons of applications have already. Not only for just Lollipop-specific devices, but also backwards compatibility. Google has done a few things, which is they've updated the design specification with new things like the floating action button and the new flyout navigation and all the brand new things, but they've also given us a brand new icon library and device metric tools to help us craft more beautiful applications. Now, when it comes to the support libraries, when Jeremy and I were on stage talking about the actual material design theming around applications, that was only actually available originally just on Lollipop devices. But oh, how that has changed with the support libraries. The support v7 app compat has been updated to bring material theming all the way back to Android, technically v7 if you want, more like gingerbread type of devices, but more importantly the ice cream sandwich hollow devices. But a new thing has come out, which is the support library for design. And this is essentially giving us a whole bunch of really cool material widgets that we can add to our application. We've already seen a few here today. For instance, the navigation view, which is our flyout, and just actually uses menu items, so it's all handled for us automatically underneath the actual slide out, which is very beautiful. The snack bar, which you saw earlier, the floating action button, and tons more that I can't even get into. The navigation view is brand new. It gives us this nice username on the top with a header layout, and underneath you can specify a menu that we have. And it uses the standard drawer layout, so if you're already using the flyout, it's an easy upgrade. Same thing with the material tabs. A lot of these are just easy upgrades if you're using any of the older libraries. And then we can specify menu items. So here we have home, favorites, messages, things like that in our application. The snack bar is just like Toast, but you have an action that you can call back to. I really like the snack bar. It's one of my favorite little widgets. And you can specify if it's going to be up for a long time, a short time, when it's all the way across the screen, if it's not across the screen. It's really, really nice to give a message, and you can pop it up right on the bottom of the screen. The difference here between Toast and the snack bar is that you have to pass it a view that it needs to essentially anchor on down at the bottom. The fab or floating action button, it's standard now. You're good to go. A lot of these controls, I had created custom versions of them and put them up on the component store. However, now things are just built right into the support design library, and boom, there's your floating action button. You're good to go. It's really simple. It handles everything automatically for you, all the shadows like you would expect correctly on the different platforms, so you don't have to worry about performance. Now, Google Play Services is amazing. It's available not only on Android and iOS, but it has a bunch of functionality that allows you to really add really cool things into your application. We blogged a lot about some of the cool features that have come out, but I wanted to highlight some of them. Since the last time we talked about Android Google Play services, a lot has happened. Different versions such as 7.5, 7.8, and the brand new 8.1 have been released. Things like app invites, Google Fit APIs, a lot of updates to Google Cloud Messaging, this new nearby messaging messages, which is really cool, essentially to detect people around you using an application. But there's a whole lot packed into here, and I wanted to step through just a few of the brand new Google Play Service APIs. App invites is probably one of my favorite APIs. Often we're sharing just a bit of text to other applications or receiving text to our applications, but how do we actually allow our users to share our application with their friends? Normally we'd have to get access to their contacts, and we have to send some special message, and then we have some backend, and we send the link. It doesn't really essentially allow us, that kind of falls down on a few things. You need special permissions, but also there's no way to deep link content. So what's really cool is App Invites enables you to have your users share your application with their friends via email or SMS. And what's cool is it deep links content. So for instance, let's say you're on a page such as a coffee shop that you've navigated to. When you share the application with a friend, they'll get the proper link for iOS or Android, and then they can download the application, and then your application will get a notification of where to go. So for instance, the user launches the application, it takes them right to the coffee shop in the application, or you give them maybe some credits or some special promo code because it's been shared with them. And this is the workflow. Start on the top left. You send an invitation, and Google App Invites automatically handles SMS or emailing for you. You can specify a little bit of application details that you want in the message. It will then send that invitation to their friends. So maybe this food to you, for instance, application. They'll install it. What's cool here is if the app's already installed, it will open the application. You get a deep link into your application. You can process it and do whatever you want. Else, if the app is not installed, Google Play Services or the Apple App Store will open up. They'll install the user, open the app, broadcast the deep link into your application, which is very cool. Some enhancements around Android Wear. You have a full map API now included as part of Google Play Services, including light mode, which is non-interactive. So if you just want to show something, a pin on a location, boom, you're good to go. Very, very nifty. Something that I found really, really cool and came out called Chrome Custom Tabs. It's a support library that's going to be part of the entire new support restructuring going on. It essentially says how many times have we had to have our users create a sign-up account or do some OAuth, or we want them to go to an About page, and we need to essentially embed some sort of web content. It's not a great experience to open the web browser separately or and try to embed a web view inside of our application. Chrome Custom Tab says, hey, if they have Chrome installed, which is the de facto on Android devices, use this custom tab, which is highly optimized inside of your application. But also enable us to customize the action bar, the colors, and also integrate into the overflow menu. So you're seeing here on the right-hand side is the Xamarin website that's been navigated to, and you can hug a monkey up there, and your application can get a callback when the user hugs a monkey, for instance, which is very cool. Or they can open in Chrome separately if they want to. Now this is really cool because it's very simple. It just has a hosted activity manager. You specify a URL. That's about it. But you can do some customization, such as set the toolbar colors. You can specify start animations in and out, and really enhance what it looks like. But I think the real win is the speed. So what we're going to see here, as it starts up, is the time, how long it takes in Chrome, Chrome Custom Tabs, or a web view to launch an application. Inside of a Chrome Custom Tabs to launch the developer portal at Android, under 2 seconds. And this is on the same network speed. And a Chrome itself, 3.7, including launching it, and in a web view, over 4 seconds. And that's just because of the different web technologies that are in there. With the Chrome Custom Tabs, it integrates, it looks just like and feels just like your application on the device. It has an overflow menu, and you can customize what it looks like on top instead of just specifying the whole URL. So you get a lot of gains by using Chrome Custom Tabs. Cool. The Mobile Vision API, I think, is really cool. It has 2 specific APIs in it. Part of Google Play Services, you can do face detection with the face detector. So it enables you, as we can see in this photo, not only detect faces, but also the smile percentage, which I think is really interesting, from 0 to 1. What's the likelihood of that person actually smiling? And it actually detects anything in any orientation, so if you're doing a lot of processing, for instance, there. Also, there's a high real-time on-device barcode scanning in any orientation, part of this mobile vision, which is very cool. Now, we've completely restructured our Google Play Service packages. In the past, you would see multiple packages if you were targeting older versions of like Lollipop or Ice Cream Sandwich or Gingerbread, and different APIs existed in each. Things have changed, and now all of the packages essentially are split out into separate Nuget packages that you're going to install into your application. There's always a base, which you'll see is the very first item, which is the core essential parts of Google Play Services. And if you're using the older Nuget packages, you're going to get all, and it's going to install everything. So I recommend removing that and pick and choose what you want. So if you want GCM or location, you would add the specific APIs that you want. And this is going to do a few things. It's just nicer that there's less packages to install and download, but also it will minimize your application size because it doesn't have to install all the actual Google Play services that are necessary. So it'll help minify some of your app size, which is very nice. So be aware of that. Now, when it comes to Android Marshmallow specifically, I do want to give some insights into what's new in Google Play Services 8.1. When we blogged about our Android Marshmallow support last week when it was released, we did mention that if you're using Google Play Services, you'll have to try to update and get the latest version of Google Play Services 8.1, which is currently in our release candidate on Nuget. There's a lot of new things in here. For instance, App Invites has been updated to do some custom images. There's some new enhancements to Google Play Games, Nearby, and a new ambient mode for Maps, which is very cool if you're using the Maps mode, but also some weird breaking changes from Google themselves as far as initializing the Google Services client. So just kind of be aware of that when you update that. It is actually required for when compiling against Android Marshmallow from everything I've seen in the documentation. So you'll actually have to upgrade your Google Play Services and make a few changes. So be very aware of this, which is very important. Now, to kind of summarize a few things and put this on your checklist for Marshmallow, is think about your permissions and your permissions workflow. And for instance, make sure that you remove some permissions that maybe you weren't using at all that you just checked accidentally, or use the brand new support v4 app compat, or sorry, context and activity compat to do the backwards compatibility checks for you. If you are running a Xamarin Forms application, there's a few things that you can do. You can leave it and just compile against and target Android API 22 and not worry about the permission checks. However, you could use the messaging center to do the same exact logic in your main activity to be aware of. So you could send messages back and forth to your main activity from your view model and your code behind in Xamarin Forms to actually do the permission checks before making specific calls. So that'd be something that you might be interested in doing. Out of the box, Xamarin Forms doesn't require any specific permissions. It's only additional APIs that you would be using. So for instance, if you're using any plugins, such as location or camera, for instance, you're going to have to apply those permissions when upgrading to the Android Marshmallow compilation and target. Be aware of all the app and the Doze and app standby, but also think about taking your application and porting it to app compat if you haven't done so already and you have a traditional Xamarin application, or at least specifying all of the brand new theming for material design in Lollipop or Grader. And of course, take a look at Google Play Services. See if there's something in there that seems really cool, because all the APIs are available not only on Android, but also available on iOS. Now, there's some great documentation. We've been blogging quite heavily over at blog.xamarin.com, not only on the release of the Android Marshmallow support, but also of things like permissions, different samples, voice interactions, and we'll have some new ones, such as confirmed credentials, coming out very soon. We also have a great getting started guide when you go to developer.xamarin.com, and this is the long link to the Android Marshmallow link. But with that, I want to thank everyone very much, and I'll open it up to questions and answers. So I'll go through a few of them here that we have. So The first question is, can I disable Doze for my app if I don't want it to be killed? Now, Doze is a system level setting, and as far as my understanding, you cannot do any of that. It's going to be the system level that. There are, for instance, I believe app standby, and I have to confirm on Doze. I'd have to look at the documentation. The user, there is some certain settings that the user may be able to disable specific Doze or app standby for specific applications, but I would not rely on that at all. Most users aren't going to do that. So you should be very aware of Doze and app standby. Next question we have is, does my application keep its past granted permissions if the app gets updated through the Play Store? Yes, it does. So as you're adding new permissions, if, for instance, currently the permissions are added and are part of the groups, and you're just adding new things into it, what you would see is all of the old permissions will still be granted, totally fine. Only new permissions would need to be applied. I think I talked about the maximum time. That's good. What if you have an app that you have not updated to run on Android M? Will it run on Android M? Of course. It's totally fine. You're totally good to go. No changes need to be made. If you have an application that's not compiled against Android M and not targeting Android M, everything to your users will be exactly the same. When they go to install your application, they'll have to grant all the permissions, and at the same time, if you keep adding new permissions, it'll be the old workflow. So it's only the old changes, and nothing else will change in older versions of Android. Some questions about the Xamarin Android player. We added Lollipop emulators, and I believe that there's some feature requests for Marshmallow coming in with the new emulators. I don't have any ETA or information on that, but it's definitely on my request list. However, you can definitely get some Android Marshmallow x86 emulators from Google, or if you have to, some ARM emulators as well. Those are certainly available. A good question here is for afterwards, more of not Android M permission, but we're going to get the presentation and some of the examples. Courtney will be sending out an entire link to the recording of the webinar, the slides for the webinar, and we'll also have a blog post going up where this will have all the examples that were shown. But definitely check out our developer portal for questions there. And I think with that, that may be all the questions that we have. If we have anyone else, feel free to ask any questions. Let's see here. Oh, sure. Another question came in is there a deadline by which all apps that need to be submitted to Google must include the permission checks? There is no deadline. You don't have to at all update your application to do the new permissions. However, if you don't, you won't be able to take advantage of the new Android Marshmallow features. And to be honest with you, I can tell that Google is making a very, very big push for all developers to do this, just because Google Play Services now requires it to be compiled with a lot of the support packages. So if you have to do stuff and you're totally fine with like every current version of Google Play and you don't need to take advantage of any new features coming out, you're probably okay at this point to just kind of go on it for a bit. However, you should really think about starting to update your applications to do this new workflow. However, nothing's going to break if it's in the store already. You're totally fine at this point, and things will continue to work as is. And Google hasn't put a hard stop at all of when applications have to support this functionality, nor do I think they will, just because there's so many applications that would need to be updated, and it'd be hard to enforce that. And I think with that, let's see here, another question came in. A question puts around direct share and what the workflow looks like for that. So how I kind of specify direct share is essentially if your application is already accepting text, pictures, anything else that can be shared via an intent filter to your application, there's just a background service and a few intent filters that you specify, and in your service, when someone wants to share text, Android will query any services that are registered for direct sharing and actually pull some information for that. So definitely check out the developer portal for more information on direct sharing. If you didn't get your question answered, if you have some questions afterward, feel free, of course, to check out forums.xamarin.com or tweet at me at James Montemagno. And I think with that, I'm not sure if Courtney's going to hop back on, but I want to thank everyone for attending the webinar, and hopefully I've helped spark some new exciting new features of Android Marshmallow to make your application even more beautiful with these new cool awesome features. And of course, if you have any questions at any time, just feel free to ask. And with that, thank you guys so much.
Thank you, James. As James mentioned, we will be posting a blog post following up with the recording and some of the other materials next week, and everyone who registered will also receive the recording via email as soon as we get it sorted. So thank you so much for attending, and we look forward to seeing you at the next webinar.